My wife ignored me for weeks, as if I were invisible. Then one morning, I left with my son without a word. Before we begin, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please click the subscribe button and support the channel. This way, you'll ensure you never miss amazing videos. It's just another normal evening in my house. My son, Caleb, is upstairs finishing his homework. Meanwhile, it's just me and Lauren, my wife of 6 years, sitting at the dinner table. I'd love to say we were having a deep, meaningful conversation, but the truth is, it was dead silent. She barely touched her food, just pushing it around with her fork as if she was lost in thought. At first, I assumed maybe she had a rough day or she was just tired, but the way she kept avoiding eye contact, something was off. So I finally spoke up. Everything okay? She stopped moving. Then she looked up at me, and that was the moment everything changed. I think we should try an open marriage, she said. I swear, for a second, I thought I misheard her. I blinked, my brain scrambling to make sense of what she just said. What? She didn't even hesitate or laugh. She just leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, and said, I just think maybe we should have more freedom, explore things. It could make our relationship stronger. Stronger? My mind was racing, but at the same time, it felt like everything just slowed down. There was no shame in her voice, no guilt. It wasn't like she was testing the waters or worried about my reaction. She had already made up her mind, and that's what scared me the most. I could have blown up right there. I could have demanded to know what she was thinking, if there was already someone else, if I was just the last to find out. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there for a moment. When I finally spoke, my voice came out calm, steady. That's not the marriage I signed up for. I kept my eyes locked on hers. If you're tired of this, just say it. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. She just shrugged and said, I figured you'd say that. Then, just like that, she stood up, picked up her plate, and walked away. It was like she had already moved on in her head. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a conversation. It wasn't even a request. It was a decision she had already made. She wasn't waiting to see what I thought about it. She was just informing me. Later, I found out exactly where this was coming from. Lauren had a friend who did the same thing. Talked her husband into opening their marriage while still keeping his money, his home, and his stability. And Lauren, she had been watching, waiting, imagining herself in that exact situation. She wanted the best of both worlds. A husband for security, other men for excitement. And the worst part, she actually thought I'd be okay with it. The next morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar silence. No good morning from Lauren, just silence. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already there, coffee in hand, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even standing in the same room. I waited for some kind of acknowledgement, a glance, a nod, a single word, nothing. Usually we at least exchanged a simple have a good day before leaving for work. Not today. When I finally said morning, she didn't even look up, just took a sip of her coffee and kept scrolling. That day at work, I checked my phone a few times, expecting maybe a casual text from her. Again, nothing. No updates, no check-ins, and no questions about how my day was going. It was like I didn't exist. That night at dinner, the distance between us felt physical, like there was a wall between our seats at the table. I tried to talk to her, but her responses were short, clipped, and lifeless. Okay, that was all I got. The woman I had shared my life with for 6 years now treated me like a stranger. And the worst part, she didn't seem to care. Over the next few days, the cold shoulder turned into something worse. Lauren stopped pretending altogether. If she wasn't ignoring me, she was being openly disrespectful. Sitting on the couch next to me, texting someone and smiling down at her phone like a teenager in love. I could see the glow on her face, the way her fingers typed fast, like she was fully engaged in whatever conversation she was having. When I asked, who are you talking to? She rolled her eyes and muttered, no one, right? She started going out more, dressing up like she was single, fancy outfits, taking extra time on her hair and makeup. If I asked where she was going, her answers were vague at best. Out with friends, she'd say, slipping on her heels. If I pushed for details, she'd just grab her purse and mutter, why do you care? Before slamming the door. Some nights, she didn't come home at all. No text, no call, no explanation. The next morning, she would walk in like nothing happened, head straight to the bathroom, and then crawl into bed without a word. I could smell alcohol, but I kept my cool because I knew what would happen if I said anything. She'd just roll her eyes, laugh in my face, and tell me I was paranoid. One night, when I had finally had enough, I stood in the doorway as she walked in, my arms crossed. Lauren, we need to talk. She looked up at me, smirked, and laughed. No, we don't, she said, brushing past me. Then she walked into the bedroom and shut the door in my face. That was when I realized this wasn't just indifference, it was intentional. She wanted me to feel worthless. It's one thing to feel like your wife doesn't care about you anymore. It's another thing when your child starts noticing it too. One evening, I was standing in the kitchen clearing the dinner table when Caleb looked up at me with his big curious eyes. Dad, why doesn't Lauren eat with us anymore? For a second, I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to an 11 11-year-old, that the woman he considers family doesn't care about sitting at the same table as us anymore, that she chooses to ignore us. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. She's just been busy, buddy. He nodded, not questioning it. But the way he looked at me, he probably knew I was lying. That night, after Caleb went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at nothing. I felt like a ghost in my own home, like I was slowly disappearing. And Lauren didn't even have the decency to pretend to care. I got to my breaking point one night. It was late, 2 a.m. to be exact, when I woke up to the sound of quiet giggles beside me. At first, I was disoriented, half asleep. I turned my head, blinking through the darkness, and there was Lauren lying next to me in bed, her phone screen glowing in the dim room. Her face was lit up. I didn't say anything at first, I just watched. She was texting someone, scrolling, laughing softly to herself, completely unaware that I was awake. Or maybe she knew, but she just didn't care anymore. Something inside me snapped right then and there. Up until that moment, I had been holding on, trying to rationalize her behavior, telling myself that maybe this was just a phase. But watching her in that moment, smiling at another man through a screen while lying in our bed, made something very clear to me. She wasn't coming back. And more than that, she thought I would just sit there and take it. Not anymore, I told myself. I refused to be a placeholder. The next morning, while Lauren was still asleep, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to leave with a plan. From that moment on, I started documenting everything. Every late night, she came home without an explanation. Every time, she ignored my questions with a dismissive, "Why do you care?" Then I got my one chance. Lauren left her phone unattended for a few minutes, and I took it. I opened her messages, took screenshots of every conversation she had with the men she was flirting with, and sent them to myself. I saved the proof because I wasn't going to let her twist the story when I walked away. Then I took the next step. I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to know my options and what I needed to do to make sure I had everything in place before I left. I wasn't just walking away. I was making sure Lauren would have no hold over me once I was gone. After that, I spoke to my boss. I had been wanting to transfer to another state for a while now, but I had never gone through with it because of Lauren. Now that hesitation was gone. My boss approved it almost immediately. The last thing I did, I secured an apartment in my new city. Everything was set. A fresh start was waiting. All I had to do now was wait for the perfect moment. Leaving wasn't something I could do overnight. I had to be patient and watch. What I saw only confirmed my decision. Lauren spiraled deeper into selfishness. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She made no effort to hide her disinterest, her disrespect. She left when she wanted and came back when she felt like it. If I asked a question, she looked at me like I was annoying her. And Caleb? She barely acknowledged him. Although he is not her biological child, it was like he didn't exist to her. She was so focused on chasing the life she thought she deserved that she didn't even care about the boy who lived under the same roof as her. That was when I knew it was time to go. Lauren probably woke up late the morning we left. She had gotten comfortable in her routine, sleeping in, taking her time before rolling out of bed, knowing she didn't have to rush for anything. But then she would have noticed something. The house was too quiet. Maybe at first she wouldn't think much of it, but as she moved through the house, she would notice the little details she would find. The final piece when she wandered into the kitchen for her morning cup of coffee, which she takes every morning. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter right beside the coffee machine. I knew she would find it there the moment she reached for her first cup of the day. Inside were the divorce papers, and right on top of it, a small, sticky note in my handwriting. "I hope you find the freedom you wanted." I can only imagine her reaction. I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care, because there's no need. After I left, Lauren never called. Not once. She never reached out, pretending to care if there was any part of her that missed me or even the life we had built together. It wasn't enough for her to pick up the phone. She didn't care. The only time I finally heard from her was through a lawyer. Not a phone call, not a message. A formal legal demand with her name stamped at the bottom. And what was she after? Money? She didn't want to know how I was doing. She didn't want to fix things. She just wanted a payout. Lauren wasn't interested in fighting for Caleb. He was never hers to begin with. She had never truly stepped into the role of a mother. And when I walked away, she didn't even try to pretend she wanted custody. But what she did want was my money. Her lawyer's letter laid out her demands like a grocery list. A lump sum payment to compensate her for the years we were married. Alimony, even though she was fully capable of working. And the most ridiculous part, half of my assets. She actually believed that after everything she had done, I would still be responsible for maintaining her lifestyle. It was almost laughable. The entitlement, the sheer audacity. She wasn't asking for what was fair. She was asking to be rewarded for treating me like garbage. But I had no intention of playing along. Walking into that courtroom, I already knew how this was going to end. I had spent months preparing, gathering every piece of evidence I needed to make sure she didn't get a single cent from me. me. I had documented her late nights, her indifference, her blatant disrespect. I had saved screenshots of her messages with other men, proving that this wasn't just an emotional disconnect. She had already moved on before she even asked for an open marriage. When my lawyer laid everything out, it wasn't even a fight. The judge took one look at the case and ruled in my favor. Lauren got nothing. She had spent so much time acting like I was disposable, convinced that I would either stay and tolerate her behavior or leave and still be financially obligated to her. But now she had gambled and lost everything. She had no one to blame but herself. It had been over 2 years since I walked away. 2 years since Caleb and I packed up and left that house behind. In all that time, Lauren never reached out. She was perfectly fine with it, and I had moved on. I wouldn't say I was completely healed, but I was better. I was no longer waiting for an apology or some last-minute realization from her. I had come to terms with the fact that there would never be closure. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. I was in the middle of making dinner when I saw the name flash across my screen. Lauren. I had no idea why I didn't delete her number. For a second, I just stared at it. My fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to pick it up or just let it ring out. What could she possibly want now? Part of me already knew. People like Lauren only reach out when they want something. Finally, I answered. George. Her voice was different. There was none of the confidence she once carried, none of the dismissiveness she had when she walked away from our marriage. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I let the words hang between us. I could hear the hesitation in her breathing, like she wasn't sure if I was going to hang up or hear her out. I was selfish, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought you would always be there. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. There it was. The realization came far too late. Then, after a long pause, she said the words I knew were coming. I miss you. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. I exhaled, my voice calm, steady. Do you miss me? Or do you miss the fact that I loved you even when you didn't deserve it? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. She tried again, her voice breaking. George, please. But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't that man anymore. The one who waited, who hoped, who let himself be an afterthought in his own marriage. Lauren, I hope you heal, but I'm not coming back. I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free.